Good evening. This is Justin Tidwell, coming to you to talk again about legislative action that was taken for today at the U.S. federal government. Trying to speak about it in a rational, non-confrontational, and hopefully non-biased manner. And today we'll start with, the Senate didn't do anything again. They didn't meet. And again, if we look at executive actions taken by the president, there was no official executive. I'm sure the president does his job, but no executive orders, proclamations, etc., etc. So we will spend our time again looking at the House. Now, the House had an interesting day. Started with a bunch of speeches, stuff like that, normal stuff. Then they went and they actually addressed two issues today. First, there was a concurrent resolution, and the concurrent resolution was H.Res.Con Res 3, expressing the sense of Congress condemning the recent attacks on pro-life facilities, groups, and churches. Now, if you read that concurrent resolution, and who knows what the Senate will do with it, my guess is they won't do anything with it, but they might. This one is innocuous enough that they may. But when you actually read the concurrent resolution, what you see is a list up front of a bunch of examples of vandalism, destruction of private property, things like that, that all occurred at pro-life clinics and things like that, which I think most people can agree destruction of private property is a bad thing, right? So in general, I don't think there would normally be a lot of pushback. But in the last bit of it, what it says is resolved by the House of Representatives, the Senate concurring, again, don't know if the Senate will, but this is what the language is right now, that Congress, one, condemns recent acts of vandalism, violence, and destruction against pro-life facilities, groups, and churches. That one doesn't seem bad, right? Don't do violence. But the second one, I think, is going to be a sticking point. And I think this is why, so the Democrats basically voted against it, and the Republicans voted for it. And I think the reason that the Democrats voted against it was mainly this second point. Recognizes the sanctity of life and the important role pro-life facilities, groups, and churches play in supporting pregnant women, infants, and families. Now, the second clause of that is fine. It's the first clause, recognizing the sanctity of life. That's a lot of pro-choice people consider that term, sanctity of life, almost a code word. For radical pro-life supporters. So I think that's really the thing that's stuck in people's craw. And then the last one calls upon the Biden administration to use all appropriate law enforcement authorities to uphold public safety and to protect the rights of pro-life facilities, groups, and churches. And again, my guess is the Democrats had some problem with that too, and honestly I have problems with that too, because all of these acts of vandalism occurred in states. It's a state issue. It's not a federal issue. So I think there's good reason for the folks that didn't care for this. There's good reason for them to have voted against it because of those two clauses, the kind of code word of sanctity of life, and the last one saying, hey, Biden administration should do something when it's a state issue. But having said that analysis aside, obviously the debate had nothing to do with that. The debate was a bunch of emoting nonsense as far as I'm concerned, but apparently that's the way people debate these days, so whatever. Anyway, but it ended up passing basically on a party line vote. It wasn't quite party line, but it was pretty close. So that was the first thing that happened today in the House. The second thing that happened today was HR, an actual bill To amend Title 18 United States Code to prohibit a healthcare practitioner from failing to exercise the proper degree of care in the case of a child who survives an abortion or attempted abortion. Okay. And again, obviously, pro-choice people were staunchly against this. And again, I'm gonna, I don't, well, they were staunchly against it. But let me just talk about the kind of the what the legislation does. The first thing it does is it basically says, hey, if when you try to effect an abortion, if you fail, if the child comes out of the woman's body alive, then you as a medical practitioner are obliged to try to save that life. And it says that if you don't, then if there's somebody else there around you that's not the mother doesn't have to report you. But if you're not the mother, and there's somebody else there, then they have to report you, and it should be treated basically like murder, basically like killing a child. There's a specific exception. The mother is not considered guilty ever, and the mother can actually come back after the fact. And if you're in this situation and you don't do everything you can to save the life of the child, you as the medical practitioner can be held liable civilly for civil penalties. So the legislation was very careful to protect the mother in this case, which is often what you see in this type of legislation. Again, whether you agree with that or not is obviously up to you. It's not up to me. It's up to you, and really, we have very little to do with it because we don't write this legislation. But that's what the legislation says. There's a little thing that I don't know if this is what was sticking in people's craws, but it defines terms, and it defines an abortion, and it says abortion. I'm just gonna read it. Abortion. The term abortion means the use or prescription of an instrument, medicine, drug, or any other substance or device, A, to intentionally kill the unborn child of a woman known to be pregnant, or B, to intentionally terminate the pregnancy of a woman known to be pregnant with an intention other than 1, after viability, to produce a live birth and preserve the life and health of the child born alive, or 2, to remove a dead unborn child. Well, the problem with that definition, and honestly, this is a problem that I would have with this definition too. I don't know if anybody else had this problem, but I'm just going to say it. I haven't read all of the U.S. Code. There's a lot of it, so I haven't read all of it. So I don't know if this is defined anywhere else. But my problem with this definition is it doesn't. There are lots of medical conditions where a woman is pregnant and you actually have to terminate the pregnancy. Because there is a medical threat to the mother. So whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, in that case, right, in those cases, right, those instances where you have these situations where where the mother will die if the pregnancy isn't terminated, and if you're a few weeks in, there's no way to save the life of that baby. It's just not possible, right? And there's, in this particular definition, that isn't being called out explicitly. So I would have a problem with that, because I don't consider that's a medically necessary procedure to preserve the life of the mother. So wherever you stand on the pro-life, pro-choice spectrum, that should not be considered an abortion. That's something else, in my mind. And the definition, as it's stated here, doesn't acknowledge that is a reality. So I would probably have a problem with this bill as it's currently written as well. Actually, I personally don't think the government should be getting into this area at all. So I don't have a problem with this, full stop. Um, but that's neither here nor there. Even if I were in agreement with it overall, I think the definition of abortion would be a little bit of a problem for that reason. Anyway, so what happened with that one is it's called H.R. 26. Like I said, H.R. 26, and I already read it off, so I'm not going to read it again. Diana DeGette tried to recommit this particular bill to the Judiciary Committee. So a recommit is, I looked it up because I was like, what the heck's that? I saw the vote going for it, and I was like, what the heck's a recommit? Okay, well, what that is it is a tool that somebody who doesn't want a piece of legislation passed, but knows that it will pass if it actually goes to a full vote of the House, what they'll do is they'll try to recommit it. And what that does is that pushes the legislation back to a committee, presumably, or the goal would be to have more amendments made on it and things like that. But the motion to recommit failed, as you would expect. Again, because the Republicans control the House, and I'm not sure if this was part of the. Well, I don't know. I'm speculation. I'm not going to speculate. The bottom line is the motion to recommit failed, and then the motion to pass the legislation was passed. And again, it was basically a party line vote. Not quite, but again, basically a party line vote. So, what do I think the disposition of H.R. 26 is going to be? I think it's going to die again because I can't imagine the Senate passing it. I could be surprised. I don't think I will be. I don't think the Senate will pass it. It's one of those things that's, I don't know, maybe it's on the border because it's being somewhat silent on, it's being silent, it's not being somewhat silent, it's being silent on pro-life, pro-choice, and it's saying, hey, you've got this kid that was born alive under a certain set of circumstances, but it was a kid that's born alive, we should preserve that life, right? So there's some possibility that because it's that, the Senate might move forward with it, but I kind of doubt it because everybody knows that it's kind of a, it's one of those, step-by-step things. Okay, if we can get this definition of abortion in, and then we can take another step, and then we can take another step. That's what it feels like to me. And I would imagine the Senate would probably feel the same way. Again, I don't know, but so I don't think that that anything will happen in the Senate. Again, could be surprised. Even if it does end up by some miracle passing the Senate, I've got to believe that President Biden would veto it. Again, because of the incrementalism that's implied, I've got to believe that. Again, could be wrong. So. That's really all that happened today. So, along with, I guess, okay, and then there were 1-minute speeches. Yeah, well, what are 1-minute speeches, right? It's a chance for House members to bloviate a little bit, which is great. It gives them something, gives them sound bites for their constituents and whatnot. It's wonderful. But other than that, in terms of material stuff, that was the only material stuff that happened today. All right, so with that, I will go ahead and call it for the day. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your evening, or, well, whenever you listen to this. This happens to be the evening for me. So I'll say I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening. And with that, I will bid you farewell.